You know, I hear this all the time. What's the point of buying compostable products when they're going to end up in the landfill anyway? Well, today I'm going to tell you that you can have your compostable plate with cake and compost it too, and eat it too. This is a special two-part series where we have a special interview for you with the man himself, Shane Harker, CEO and founder of Rethink Resource. We got lots to cover, so what's going on, folks? My name is Elish P. This is Food Packaging TV. You know what it is. Okay, folks, before we play the interview, let me just quickly tell you what you're going to learn in part one. Who is Shane Harker? What is the purpose of Rethink Resource? How to quantify your waste, and what is a diversion report? What is the waste technology that they're using, and how is Rethink a one-stop shop? And lastly, how they help you move one step in the right direction. And in part two, you're going to cover things like, where is the service territory? What's the affordability of the services? How does Rethink operate? Do you think they really recycle? Sorting out composting organics, and how to get in touch with Shane and Rethink. We got a lot to cover here, so let's dive into the in-session interview with Mr. Shane Harker. Okay, guys, glad you can join us for this live in-session meeting with Mr. Shane Harker from Rethink Resource. Now, Shane, I'm going to let you give the introduction. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you got to creating Rethink Resource, and tell me about your journey.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Elish. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing here. But my background is trucking. My dad's a retired truck driver. I drove truck. I kind of climbed my way up, into really probably every position you can do in the trucking business. And, for a brief time, I was recruited into waste management. That's, when I learned about the environment and our impact of it. And it's interesting because before that, I was a bachelor in a basement apartment and I didn't really think about it. I didn't recycle. I was like, hey, it's only one bag of garbage, said 8 billion people. And so it really opened my eyes. So up until about I was 40, I was working in that space. And I got married and had a son, and something was off, something missing. And I really didn't know what it was except that I wanted to make an impact. Initially I left the corporate world. I started another company, and it was to build anaerobic digesters. And that's where you process organic waste and you make energy out of it. And there's a whole story about almost blowing my garage up. And I had to figure out how to make money, and that's when Rethink started. It's kind of the history.
When you talk about Rethink, and you said that you moved from a corporate world into, almost because of circumstance, you got married, had a child, and you needed finances. What was the primary motivator for Rethink Resource? And tell me about Rethink Resource and what it means to you today.
It's been quite a journey, I think, for any entrepreneur. When I first left the corporate world, my son was 3. Life was great. My wife is awesome, and she was very supportive. And when I said I wasn't happy, I wanted to make an impact, she fully supported me in it. So the genesis of Rethink, or really the company before that, and what turned into Rethink, was I wanted to make an impact in the world. We want to make a difference. And, through our journeys in life, we learn things. And, there's a lot of, people used to work for me, would say, oh, we shouldn't do it this way. We should do it this way. Right. And I was always one of those persons. And so, I knew that I wanted to make an impact. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. It was about a year between when I left and Rethink actually started. It started as a brokerage. It was going to be like, you've got garbage. Let's introduce a recycling program. And that was the start of it. It was, how do you make money and divert more waste? So have an impact, but obviously we have to make money to live. The very first customer I had, a company that I subcontracted the work to, couldn't do it. And that was probably mostly my fault. I wasn't good as a salesperson to figure out, all of the intricacies of it. But I was also kind of told, get out there, just sell, and then figure it out as you go. And that's really what we did. But it was the very first customer that we had that I had to shift from brokering something to collecting paper and recycling in my Dodge journey. And then it was, like many entrepreneurs, there was a couple more customers. I think one of the key shifts in the business was still pretty early on. I had a customer that asked me if I could provide a diversion report. I said, well, what do you want the diversion report for? And they said, well, to show that we're being environmentally friendly and to show maybe where we are and how we can improve upon it. And I said, well, you don't want a diversion report because they're kind of fictitious data and they're estimates and it's not real data. And he said, well, why don't you just weigh everything? And I said, sure, we're not making any money, so why don't we make the process more inefficient, which is exactly what we did. And when you're an early on entrepreneur, you don't make any money. So we did that. At the time, I didn't really realize the value of that data, and I think realistically, we're coming on 5 years. 5 years later, we're now starting to really realize the value of that. And that was like customer number 3, which was like a neighbor. We used to play poker in the garage. It's interesting that it was so early on that pivot happened. But the idea of actually weighing it is how can you improve something if you don't have good data? And how it's evolved is along that journey. So we had a local burger shop in Toronto. The owner, Tony, got his diversion report. He said, Shane, we're only diverting 57% of our waste, and that's not a good number. And I said, you're absolutely right. And he said, well, how do we improve that? And I said, well, there's biodegradable, there's a lot of compostable, but there's like eco this and green that. And I mean, you're in the packaging business, and I learned so much of this from you. I said to him, well, there's this stuff, and I think it's compostable, but I don't know. And he's like, you're my green guy, figure it out. So it went on a list, and it was like, yeah, it would be really good to figure that out one day. And fast forward to January, I went to the U.S. composting conference in Phoenix to learn more about composting it, because as you know, there's all kinds of, so we know now that there's actually certified compostable packaging. We know that there's compostable packaging that isn't certified because it's expensive. So we came back from there and we did a pilot. And what I learned there was there's few places to bring the compost. It's a big challenge. It's kind of like chicken or egg. Like if we want to make an impact, I think compostables are the future, but how do we capture them and compost them? And arguably, a compostable package is better than a non-compostable because you're not using oil to make that plastic, even if it is going to the landfill. But back to the pilot that we did with Noble Burgers, we substituted all of their packaging for compostables. And then being a kind of a garage entrepreneur, I wanted to see, can we actually compost this stuff? So we built a composter. It was awesome because everything broke down. And on the first try, it was amazing. And then what we did was we took the compost, we mixed it with some soil, we planted lettuce and tomatoes in the compost containers outside of the burger shop. They died because I'm a garbage man and not a farmer, and I planted them in August. And so you have to plant tomatoes in April or May. The good thing about compost is it lasts, and we used it the following year. And the final segment to this is actually that we grew lettuce and tomatoes, and Tony and I eating burgers with lettuce and tomato on it that was grown in the composted waste. That sort of model of quick serve, that any quick serve packaging you can get in a compostable. What we're working on now is really, growing the customer base, eventually getting a compost facility, in close proximity to the GTA so we can make it more efficient and less costly to actually compost the waste. Because we do have some customers that we sell compostables to and we pick them up, but we have to bring it to Belleville. For people who aren't in Toronto, it's an hour and a half east of Toronto. And it's costly to do that, but we figured out a way to make it work and not completely break the bank.
What I really like is the fact that you have found a way to quantify the waste that we're outputting. And then from the waste that we're outputting, if you can figure out what the diversion rate is that you're avoiding from the landfill and actually composting it and finding methods to aggregate and dispose of the compost product or materials at a composting facility, that's the biggest challenge. And I think you're resolving that. The best part of this closing the loop was you actually had the tomato and lettuce and you reap what you sowed. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's exactly what you guys did. That's a phenomenal story so far, because this is just the beginning of what Rethink is probably going to come out to be, because I can just foresee a lot of other companies that probably want to close the loop, but they either don't know how or they don't even know where to start. I wouldn't have not thought about quantifying the waste and then figuring out how much I'm diverting or I'm not diverting. And I think with a report like that, it can completely help anyone to understand, okay, well, if I'm here and I want to get there, well, what do I need to do to get there? And I think you provide that in a very concise manner. I think it's a phenomenal idea of what you're doing. If you don't have the data, how do you know?
How do you know where your baseline is and how do you improve upon it? And actually what's interesting about that is I said that, it's just recently that we figured out sort of the value of the data. Well, now it's the next level. We started working with many businesses. COVID happened, dramatic business. part of the struggles of a growing organization is being able to meet the demand. So there was actually some small grocers that, we had been having discussions about working with. And it was kind of funny because they're like, don't you want to, let's go. Don't you want to work with us? And I'm like, no, absolutely I do. But I want to make sure I bring you on at the right pace so that we can service you accurately. But starting to work with some of these grocers, we see the stuff that is wasted, and not on the packaging side, but on the food side. What we're evolving is the technology. When we started, we would put the cart on a scale and we would actually write the data on a piece of paper. And then we evolved to, we have a drop-down menu on a web-based app. So the next two sort of phases are, our cart system has RFIDs in it, which is, kind of like tapping your credit card for those that don't know. And the trucks have GPS on them. And we're creating a Wi-Fi network in the truck. And so the driver will put the cart on the scale. That'll create the action or the event. And what will happen is the GPS will say we're at XYZ customer, or if there's multiples, it'll ask you to choose. And the RFID will read the card and say that's an organics card or a compost card or a waste card. And the driver will get a notification on their phone and just have to click OK. And that does a couple of things. It makes the process more efficient, but it also makes the data more valid because, we're in the back alleys in downtown Toronto at 4 o'clock in the morning. We've had a mild winter, but when it's like minus 20, somebody might have a fat finger because it's swollen and cold and hit an extra zero. So it helps keep the data, the integrity of the data. And then the next evolution after that is where we hope to get with some of these grocers is we're developing an AI interface where we'll scan the cart that we pick up at XYZ customer, and then it'll come back to our facility and we'll dump it onto a conveyor. We're going to use artificial intelligence to recognize that there's 52 apples, a steak, and it's on what it learns, it'll know how much carbon we're saving by diverting that from landfill. Because right now in our diversion report, it'll tell you how much actual organics were wasted or how much paper was recycled. And then there's some neat stats about, the organics goes to a digester and it creates biogas, which creates X amount of energy. But that's an average because if you eat peas, there's more calories than there would be in lettuce. And so what we hope to evolve this, we're doing it. It's just more a question of when. But as the stuff goes down by the conveyor, we'll have scanned it and recognized that cart came from XYZ grocery store. And it'll say, we actually saved this much energy by diverting that cheese and those apples. And the future will be carbon and calculating the carbon savings by it not going into landfill. So we can actually, there's so much greenwashing out there that really we want to say, what is the actual impact? And so we really hope to bring that data, that granular data, to our customer base.
A company like yours, how many other companies are there that you would say is comparable, or are there none?
Well, so there's certainly companies that do similar things. We operate sort of in a couple of different sectors. So we've actually, because of the pilot with Noble Burgers, and actually we took that pilot onto and we worked with the Toronto Food Film Fest. And we took that model of supplying the compostables up front, and we actually helped them divert 95% of their waste. And the only reason it wasn't 100 was because people came into the movie theater and they had a coffee cup from outside or something that we couldn't divert. But the actual, all of the waste that was created in the festival, like the popcorn bags, you helped us source that stuff. All of it was compostable and all of it was diverted. So we started Rethink Packaging. So we're selling the compostable packaging. And so from that segment, there's lots of companies that sell packaging, and not judging, because a lot of, before there were compostables, there was other packaging. So a lot of businesses started doing that and then are slowly getting into selling more compostables. Well, we started, in technology, it's kind of like you skip levels, right? So we just started only selling compostables. One of the value propositions we offer our customers is if you buy the stuff from us, it's only compostable. It's as pure as you can get. There's no ambiguity and there's no guessing. So that's one thing that we do. I think that there's some bigger companies that do just compostables, but they're not as localized, say, as we are. And then the other component, as far as from the collecting and measuring, I don't know of any company that, lots of companies will give you a diversion report, but it's estimates of data. So I don't know anybody that's giving the granularity or the valid data, that the accuracy of the data that we're giving. And then as far as from the service side of things, some stuff we collect, some stuff we broker out or farm out, and that's just because we don't have all of the different types of equipment. But the value that we give to our customers is you've got one call and we will handle all waste.
You're a one-stop shop, in other words. That not only can you take over the organics removal and the compostable removal, I can't spoke today, Shane, sorry. The compostables in the green, but you can also do the recycling, even the landfill waste. Would you do that too?
Yeah, so in fact we have to, because if we don't do that, then we can't tell you what your percentage of diversion is, right?
True,
and so
true.
A couple different things is and this is newer, but in the beginning it wasn't like this. We knew we wanted to divert waste, but as I learned more about it, the single biggest thing we can do with our waste, to impact the environment is divert it from landfill. But the number one thing is the organics, because that's what goes into landfill and creates the most greenhouse gas. So we actually won't work with a company that doesn't have an organics program. And that's because I know if they don't have an organics program, whatever organics they do is going into their garbage. And I don't want to make money off of putting organics into the landfill. Like, that's not, we started the business to make an impact. And that's not judging. I know, especially with COVID times, there's lots of difficulties and stuff. It's just, I don't want to be involved in that. And if I can't help them, my goal, one of the values is because we have a truck that shows up and does waste, recycle, cardboard, organics, we collect used cooking oil, and we have a vac on the truck. So we're a one-stop shop, specialist in the restaurant space. Our one truck and one company does what 2 or 3 companies and 6 trucks it would take to do. And so that's how the model has grown for us. But we do, we've got warehousing customers, we recycle pallets, we recycle cardboard, we've got transport customers. Probably one of my favorite stories is how we get customers is we get a call. Somebody says, hey, we've got 160 barbecue cylinders that we know we can't throw out and we need help to recycle. They're like, can you help with that? And I was like, yes. And she says, well, you don't sound sure. And I said, no, I know exactly what to do to them, like with them, but where do you get 160 barbecue cylinders? So it turns out it was a yacht club. And so a lot of people with boats will bring those cylinders onto the boats because they have barbecues on the boats and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then they end up kind of around. And I mean, in fairness, that was over a course of a couple of years, and they were doing a big clean out and stuff like that. That's how we get some customers. There's an issue that we solve. In that dialogue, I'm like, we do all waste. So who does your normal waste? And they gave the name of one of the big companies. And I was like, oh, they can't help you with that. And they said, no. And I know the answer to the question. But over time, that company came to us and asked us for help with a couple other things. And I kept saying, hey, we could do the other stuff for you. And so now, after doing those odd jobs for 2 years, we landed that business in full. And now we're actually working with them to introduce compostable packaging. And it's always about moving forward and chipping away and bringing more value and helping them divert more waste.
Shane, what you just said, it rings many chords with me. So part of what you just mentioned was that you have a position, and your position is that you also want to make an impact. And by impact, you want to make sure that you're not only doing the landfill waste, but you're diverting, you're composting, you're recycling, you're doing the changes that you can. And that kind of is what our philosophy is as well, whereby what I call, it's called the one-step philosophy. It's like, I don't expect you to overnight change to all compostable packaging, if especially if your menu prices can't adjust for the bump up. But that being said, what is the gradual steps that you can take to get to that zero waste goal? And with your program, it seems like you can really help people move towards that goal, getting to that zero waste goal if they have one. There you have it, folks. That was the full interview. No, it wasn't. It was just part 1. So just to recap, so far what we've covered is who is Mr. Shane Harker, what's the purpose of Rethink Resource, how to quantify your waste or check out that diversion report, what kind of waste technology that they use, and how Rethink is the one-stop shop, and also how to move that one step in the right direction. We're going to take a break so you guys can grab a healthy snack, meditate, or simply stretch. And when you're ready, we're going to hit you up with part 2. My name is Elish P. This is Food Packaging TV. Thank you for joining me. Please feel free to subscribe, share, comment, and we'll see you part 2. Peace out.